Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we'll be doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw, as the headline says, the worst weekend at this summer's box office, though I always like to try and put summer in quotation marks whenever talking about movies coming out either in May or August, because the way I see it is that if I'm still in school, then it is not summer yet. To me, June and July are the real only true summer months, though I guess end of May, last weekend of May, maybe first week of August, maybe you could make an argument, but up to that point and after that, no, it's hard for me to really, take that in any serious way whatsoever. But The Invitation did indeed lead amongst this terrible weekend, where all the pictures domestically together combined made a total of $54 million, which is just not all that great. The Invitation coming to a $7 million opening weekend, which again, for its $10 million budget, is not the worst thing in the world, but in the grand scheme of things is definitely a sign of things to come, because there is not a major release set to come out for another 2 months. The next major release, in fact, as far as massive big budget films are concerned, is not going to be until mid-October, when you have Black Adam coming out. That's right. Up through that time, you've got a lot of smaller films coming out, you have a lot of random films coming out, you have some re-releases coming out, you got Clerks 3 coming out, and that's pretty much it as far as the releases are concerned. But before going any further, though, into these numbers and where some of the other movies stand, got some updates, of course, on Jurassic World Dominion, which I'm sure people are excited about, as well as Jurassic World Dominion, Nope, Minions 3000. I don't even know what I'm saying at this point. But anyway, before I go any further, please make sure you smash the like button, loud that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, and also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with that bell notification turned on. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. Man, I am falling apart today because this weekend has just been so bad for the box office. But as it says there, The Invitation does lead it. But I wanted to point out our good friend Tony. I like to call him over at Deadline, our good friend Tony, right? He's talking here about the summer box office. The bowels of the summer box office have been reached with Sony's new C CinemaScore horror movie. Again, CinemaScore is complete and utter garbage. All they ever release is the C, not any of the actual data surrounding it. And that's very, very little to actually work on. It goes on to say, like the late Andy Rooney, I get a lot of mail from sources, but in this instance, it's about why it's important to be gentle when covering box office. We're still in the pandemic. We're not back yet. It's got good for our... Nonsense. So I'm at the very least happy that he's kind of calling it out to that respect. But I will say he has one of the funniest lines that I've ever seen. And it says here, let's be honest, the more you spend, the more you gross. So the more you spend, meaning bigger budget films, maybe there's something true to that your overall box office number tends to be higher. However, it's not a guarantee. There are big budget films that didn't make a lot of money, and especially when you compare the amount of money that they put into the movie versus the actual raw net gains, net profits, that is absolutely not true either. You still need to make a good movie. You still need to make a movie that people are going to actually want to see and has positive word of mouth. In fact, there's a movie within this very cycle that has a much larger than expected $60 million budget. That's a brand new release that only made $2 million in its grand opening. So spending more does not necessarily mean that you make more. Again, I see what he's trying to do here, but at the same time as well, good job, Tony. Let's go to the actual numbers themselves. As you can see, Invitation at the top of the list of a very, very slow weekend, making $7 million in its domestic. Again, it is a horror film that cost $10 million to make, and so that's a strong start for it. But guess what? Sony's actually coming in number one in the top 2 spots this week, because Bullet Train was able to push itself back into the number 2 spot, making another $5.6 million, a 30% drop from last week, which is a pretty good hold overall. And I think that right now, 4 weeks in, those are the kinds of holds that this film is going to need to see if it has any chance of being able to actually break even, which is still a possibility at this point. It's going to be difficult. It's going to have to continue to perform very strongly. But as I said, with no real major releases and the biggest competition coming out, at least in the next couple weeks that I'm aware of, being the re-release of Spider-Man, there isn't a whole lot that's going to distract away from people seeing this movie. And so I could totally see the film continuing to perform around the $5 to $4 to $3 million over the next several weeks. And so if it's able to continue to push that on, if it's able to do similar numbers, or at the very least be able to do similarly as it has been doing internationally, you could see the film make its money back. But it's going to be a very long road for that movie. It's not going to be a film that's going to make its money in the next week or two. It's going to be one of those films that by the end of its run, maybe it gets there, but it still has quite a ways to go. Coming in at the number 3 spot, though, in its second week of release, dropping to the number 3 spot, also dropping 58% in the second week of its release. So not a terrible drop as far as a week 1 and week 2 drop off, but not making a whole lot of money its opening weekend, and having a movie still cost in the $38 million range puts this film still in a situation where it's got to do a little bit more than that if it's going to have any hope of making its money back in comparison to a film like Bullet Train, for instance, which cost a lot more than Beast, but it did a lot better. Bullet Train did at least as far as its overall box office is concerned. But this film dropped 58% to $4.9 million, bringing its total domestic to $20 million overall. It even added 11 screens. I suspect, though, that this film will start to drop screens pretty quickly. That being said, it's going to be interesting to see where this film falls in the long run because of just no real film competition coming out over the next several weeks. If you want to know how bad things really are, when you have Top Gun Maverick continuing to be in the top 5 after 14 weeks of release, and don't get me wrong, it's a fantastic film that deserves to be in the top 5, but when you've been out for 14 weeks and you are available on digital media now for $20 and you are still only getting 20% drops and still added over 3,000 or almost 3,000 screens, yeah, that kind of shows you the state of where the box office currently is right now. Again, I think Top Gun Maverick is great, but when it's in your top 5 still, and it's not too far off from some of the others, and it's seeing the kinds of drops that could actually bring it back into the top 3 for all we know over the next couple weeks, yeah, to say things are going to get interesting is an understatement, especially when you have limited releases, especially re-releases of older films. So you have, for instance, the re-releases of films like Jaws, and you have, of course, Spider-Man No Way Home, and many other films that are getting re-released over the next couple of months. Those types of films and those types of releases tend to make a couple $1 million on their weekends back because it's only going to be in films, it's only going to be in theaters for a short time, and normally they choose films that were themselves pretty successful or pretty well loved. So you have that potential for even those films to even be in the top 5 numbers, which, as I would say, is also not a very good sign or a very healthy sign for the box office overall. But Top Gun Maverick still in the top 5 there. Rounding out the top 5, though, is Dragon Ball Super, dropping to the 5th place spot after dominating last weekend, making $20 million. Keeping in mind, right, last weekend the number 1 film made $20 million. This weekend the top film made $7 million. This film had a massive 78% drop, and I know some people said that they didn't think the drop was going to be as massive as it was being predicted, but no, it matched up to that. It's interesting. I think that a lot of people, I guess, are kind of used to these movies getting released in a very short window where they're only released on specific days, and that may be used to having this kind of full release schedule that it's having right now, and then everyone just wanted to go see it, I guess, opening weekend. But to see this kind of a drop-off is kind of impressive to me. The film has made its money back because it didn't really cost that much to make, but it is still interesting nonetheless that the film has had such a massive drop-off, especially when I know there are still a lot of Dragon Ball Super fans, anime fans out there. Looks like all of them went last weekend, and none of them, or just maybe a few of them, went this weekend because they wanted it to be maybe the same number of theaters with less people. And hey, if you went to go see the theater and went to the theater this weekend, you probably had a lot of empty space in most of the screens, I could imagine, especially compared to the previous weekend. DC League of Super Pets dropped to the number 6 spot, making another $4.2 million, so a 26% hold there, so still at over 3,000 screens. So yeah, it's holding on. It still has a ways to go, similar to Bullet Train, where it has a ways to go. If it has similar drop-offs, the chances of it making its money back is potentially there. But I do think the climb is going to be a little bit harder for a film like DC League of Super Pets, at least at this point in time. Still at over 3,000 screens, though. Dropped another 253 screens just over the last week. But after 5 weeks of release, it's looking like this film probably will get seen a little bit more once it gets put onto HBO Max. A brand new film came in the number 7 spot, a film that I've actually heard of. Many of you maybe have never heard of it before, called 3,000 Years of Longing from United Artists. It's an independent-style movie coming out at over 2,400 screens. This film cost $60 million to make. That's right, $60 million to make, and it made $2.8 million in its opening weekend. So again, going back to Tony over here on box office, over the box office section on Deadline. Yeah, let's be honest, the more you spend, the more you gross is not necessarily the case, especially when you look at this film and compare it to some of the others, which cost less in certain instances or cost more in certain instances. Again, it's kind of a crapshoot in certain respects. Coming in number 8 spot is Minions Rise of Gru, which is still hanging around. So this movie is now losing to DC League of Super Pets, which, again, 9 weeks versus 5 weeks does make some sense, but interesting nonetheless. Minions also still doing better than Thor Love and Thunder, which I find to be quite entertaining, though the movie is still seeing pretty low drops from week to week, but it is starting to be pulled from theaters by Disney, even amidst this very slow box office. And yeah, the film was able to make its money back, is going to probably get close to $100 $100 million when everything is said and done. But nonetheless, it's going to be interesting to see exactly how all of this stuff works out in the end as far as where this film ends up on total profitability margins compared to some of the other MCU films. I imagine it's not going to be one of the most profitable films in the MCU, and after a film like Doctor Strange 2 somehow getting to $950 million worldwide, it is, again, an interesting trend nonetheless that we will probably see exactly where it leads to when we have films like next year, for instance, coming out like The Marvels, how that film does. It's, I think, going to be kind of the real test to see exactly where this MCU audience is, because right now it's in a very major state of flux. Going on, continuing with the number 10 spot here is Where the Crawdads Sing, making another $2.3 million, which, again, for a film that's an adaptation of a book, that's still pretty impressive that the film is hanging around the top 10, especially over other films that have been re-released or films that have been hanging around for a little bit less time than that, like films like Nope, for instance, which came out a week earlier, but is generally seen as being more talked about, having more promotions for it at the very least. So you would think that the film would do better, but yeah, that film is definitely behind and is losing a lot of screens. But I will say that Nope does have some silver lining. It does have some light at the end of its tunnel, because its international numbers, now that they're finally coming in, is starting to make its chance of making its money back actually look a lot more likely at this point in time. You then also had the re-release of Rogue One, a Star Wars story, where it made $1.1 million, which per screen is not terrible, but yeah. Don't know a lot of people that wanted to go see Rogue One again in theaters. Jurassic World Dominion is also still hanging around as well, making $680,000. They are just trying to will this thing past $1 billion, which it very well could still do, but man, oh man, they are just so desperate. It only added another $5 million or so worldwide from this, from last week to this week. And so if that law of diminishing returns continues, then it might just miss out on $1 billion. They could also, of course, say, hey, if you go to our theater and go see the movie again, we'll give you a poster or we'll give you something special. And that could be all that they would need to bump that number up to push it past $1 billion. Either way, the film still sucks and it still made its money back and made massive profits. So it is what it is. But as I mentioned, not a whole lot of films are coming out over the next month or so. Again, even into mid-September, you have films like The Woman King, you have the Avatar re-release, you have Clerks 3 coming out, Barbarian Medieval, you have the Jaws re-release coming up next weekend up against Honk for Jesus, and Spider-Man No Way Home's more fun stuff version. So as you can see, this is exactly where you would want to be if you were a film like a Bullet Train or an Invitation, because you don't have a lot of competition coming up, or at least brand new big budget competition that's going to take away too many of your actual screens. Invitation right now only is showing domestic numbers with $7 million, but $10 million budget puts it in a pretty good position. Bullet Train now up to $159.2 million, so still has a ways to go. Beast in its second week of release is only at $36.1 million, and even though it is just about making back where its budget was, which was around the $38 million mark or so, it's going to be interesting. This is going to be another interesting film to follow, similar to that of Bullet Train, of whether or not it's going to be able to, in the midst of very little competition and two very slow months at the theaters, talking, of course, about the rest of August and pretty much all of September, where this film ends up in the long run and where this film ends up by the end of its run. Top Gun Maverick, though, continuing to hang around. This is going to be basically the only competition that a lot of these films are going to have. It's interesting that Maverick, even after 14 weeks, is still one of the best performing films at the box office. It deserves to be, because it is just a darn good movie. Still over $1.4 billion in its release. So, hey, kudos to them for being able to win out against films that were so much worse. In fact, just awful films compared to this, which is a good film, like The Last Jedi, for instance. This film also has a chance to make $700 million domestically, which I think would be very interesting if it was able to pull that off, to have not only a $700+ million domestic, but also a $700 million international number. Is just massive, and I don't think anyone saw that coming. Dragon Ball Super's $56.9 million in total for its worldwide box office. As I said, very small production budget means this film was able to make its money back pretty easily. I don't know if there's been an official budget release for this film, but the last films have cost somewhere between $8 and $10 million, so easily has made its money back regardless of what the end total for the film actually ends up being. We have DC Lego Super Pets, which again, $138.1 million, has pretty much stopped making money, but again, domestically, it's going to make another couple $1 million here or there in the next few weeks. So again, still probably not enough to make its money back, as I don't think it's doing much internationally at all. So yeah, I think that this thing should probably just be put on HBO Max at this point. 3,000 Years of Longing, that's right. You have Idris Elba as a Jinn/Genie, whatever it is that they're going to call it. But also you have the very always weird Tilda Swinton, who I actually really enjoy as an actress. I think she's very, very talented. But yeah, this is an indie film that cost $60 million to make. and it made $2 million. In fact, on my charting, normally when you have compared to its budget number, right? Normally it's, you have to make 2.5 times the budget to break even or so. And this film isn't even charting on there. It's 0.0. In fact, it's 0.05. So just barely out of being 0. Again, not looking good at all for this movie in the long run, but we'll have to, of course, wait and see as it's just coming out. I don't know if they have a crazy release schedule planned or if this film is going to do anything internationally, but let's just say not looking too good for this movie. Minions Rise of Gru continuing to do well. A lot of it has to do with the fact that Universal likes to work with the country of China, for instance, where it's made $19.5 million. At least according to this chart, I think that the number is probably a little bit higher now. Regardless of all that, it is still nonetheless working with the Chinese Communist Party, and I'm going to call them out for that nonetheless. And this film probably going to get over $900 million by the end of its run. Thor: Love and Thunder at $746.6 million. Again, profitability territory, but compared to some of the other Marvel films, when comparing its budget specifically and actual net gains and net profits, really leaving still much to be desired there. You have Where the Crawdads Sing making over $100 million worldwide. Pretty impressive stuff there. Nope, because of its international numbers, as I mentioned before, is likely going to be the saving grace for this film. Filmed not too far out from breaking even itself, and so I suspect that will happen over the next few weeks because of the international numbers there, as long as it's able to make at least a little bit in the various countries that it has yet to be released in / have just recently been released in. Elvis continuing to hang around as well in the discussion. Jurassic World Dominion at $990 million. We'll have to, of course, wait and see whether it breaks $1 billion or not. And then Fall is kind of hanging around, no pun intended, but it is what it is at this point. Going to my charting, because we love to do charting here on OMBReviews.com. Go check out my website if you want to find out more about this. But the $7 million for The Invitation, again, $10 million production budget means that the film is around $10.8 million in the red because of typical marketing cost and the typical break-even points. Films like 3,000 Years of Longing's $2.8 million, though, compared to its $60 million budget, means right now it's $88.2 million in the red. And as I said, there's another category in one of the other charts on this page where it'll actually bring you to, exactly where this compares to its budget. Yeah, right now 0.0 is where this film currently stands. So not a very good look for that. We also have the second weekend numbers for Beast, which means that we can make some projections. I'm projecting the film to lose somewhere between $10 and $22 million. Now, because it is set to lose a small amount of money in comparison, it means that with a slower box office, it might be able to pull something off. Again, 36 to 51 million right now 51 million to 72 million is right now the range, the total box office that I see for the movie, but with little competition, maybe it sees a little bit more. We will have to, of course, wait and see exactly where it falls in the long run, but I'm expecting it to lose money. Right now, it's $30 million in the red, but we'll have to wait and see. We also have the movie Fall up to $6.6 million. We're still waiting on this to actually update with this past weekend's numbers, so it very well could have broken even at this point in time, but it's just so little being talked about that it's hardly worth mentioning. Bullet Train is at $39.4 million. As I mentioned, it's not going to be a very easy task for this film to hit its break-even point, but it's definitely still possible because, again, nothing is coming out over the next month or two. League of Super Pets still at $52 million in the red. That's why I said it's going to be a little bit harder for this film to be able to pull it off. The film Nope now at $12.7 million in the red. Those international numbers, if they continue to come in as they are, and it continues to hold on somewhat domestically amidst especially slow box office season, again, I think breaking even is definitely within the realm of possibility for this movie. And then, of course, you have Where the Crawdads Sing, $25 million in net profits for this movie, making over $100 million. So kudos to them for definitely overperforming in various ways. You also have Minion Rise of Gru, which is at $372.6 or 0.7, or almost rounding up to 0.7 million in net profit for that movie. Black Phone still hanging around at $68.8 million in net profit. Elvis, $36.3 in profit, where this film originally was thought to be a loser, was originally going to lose money, but because it was able to stick around and was able to do much better than expected, it was able to make money. So again, I don't see Bullet Train doing the same types of numbers because just in comparison, it hasn't done the same types of numbers, but it's still definitely a possibility, at least for Bullet Train, to make its money back with films like this in the discussion. Lightyear still making some money, but as I mentioned, it's going to be well over $150 million in the red for that movie. Jurassic World Dominion, $346.7 million in net gain profits, but will it hit $1 billion? People still say it will, but again, it's kind of running out of room at this point in time, and honestly, I still don't actually care because it still sucks. But Top Gun Maverick, great to see this film at $1.404 billion, $587 million in net gain profits for that film. But those are the numbers as they stand. What are y'all's thoughts about this? Have you seen any of the films that have been released this weekend? Whether it's The Invitation, 3,000 Years of Longing, maybe you've caught up with things like Dragon Ball Super, Superhero, and Beast, or anything like that. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Again, crazy slow box office weekend here. But anyway, I'll see you in the comment section. Make sure you smash the like button, lap that fire button, and honestly, you guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my Keeper of the Bifrost and Chosen of Valhalla members over on Patreon, Subscribestar, and Locals. Starting off with my Patreon supporters, we got Chris from the 80s, who you can check out on YouTube, Garrett Searles, Heimir Irie Hymason, Jeff Toon, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Laura, The Modern Major General Story, Father Luca Illick, Orange Hat Reviews, who you can also check out on YouTube, Rosetta Allen, whose YouTube channel's name is Eagle Rider, Stan Andrian, Miss Martin Muses, who also has a YouTube channel, and the Empress of the Universe, Tina B, who you can check out on her show that she does with the amazing Stephanie B, my Valkyrie, on a show called Soup to Nuts on Tina B's channel. Also to my Subscribestar peeps, we got Matt317, who you can support over on Twitch, same name, Storm Tracker, The R, Fast Reaction, Mr. Roy, J-Rod, The Beer Guru, and ZK-Man, who you can support over at xtheboundaries.co. And lastly, to my Locals members, we got Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan, How About a Hockey Player? We have UAB Mad Dog Mike Jackson for the win, Brett D90, and Robert Barnes, who most people should know about at this point, so go support him over at InfoWars, YouTube, and all the other locations that he is at. But if you want your name shouted out at the end of every single video and live stream, check out that top link in the video description. Finds out all the places that you can follow me on social media, and also all the various platforms that you can support the channel, which include not only shoutouts, but also access to giveaways of 4K titles, Blu-rays, tons of other stuff like that, digital codes, and then also a way to get access to being featured on the channel once a month for the Chosen of Valhalla live stream, where we talk about movies, pop culture, and pretty much anything the Chosen want to talk about. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, check out the video description. There's also access to a podcast that I do with John the Flick Pig Flickinger once or twice a month. And don't worry if you were wondering where the July episode is, because of scheduling conflicts, especially with John, we were not able to get that done, but we will have 2 episodes this month to make up for it, so don't you worry about that. Anyway, you guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.